Hey there, rugby fans. Welcome to another great episode here on the Rugby Rant podcast show, where we put ourselves and our guests to the test in this rugby debate format. Now, it is important to be able to first off introduce everybody on screen. My name is Ty Braga, your host for today's activities, alongside Scott, the big guy Ferrara, Rob the Hammer Hammerschmidt, and Brianna Kim, who more importantly is coming here as the MLR authority, as a sideline reporter, and more recently, I can say congratulations on your appointment as the head of development in the Academy program for OGDC. Brianna, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Ty, and thanks so much, guys, for having me on the show. No pressure here. No problem, right?
Right. Well, you're the consummate professional. We're just the amateurs.
That's one way to put it, I guess. We'll see.
Right. Like we were debating shirts in the beginning of the show, what we should put on them. My favorite was the Rugby Rant. 3 guys who think they know about rugby. But you certainly are an ambassador for the sport in many different ways. And it's a pleasure to be able to have you joining us here. And, I also wanted to be able to take the opportunity to remind everybody while we have a chance that what we do is brought to you in part with the help of our sponsors at Shop MLR, and more importantly, the guys backing it at, of course, the rugbyshop.com. Talking about a rugby gear. So, Rob, what are you sporting there? I actually haven't seen that one before.
That's my favorite shirt on the show. Rob, you're looking great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I wore it in your honor, Brianna. I really did, because I want to make you feel comfortable as our guest on our show.
I feel so welcome now. So there you go.
And meanwhile, some others on the show who will not be mentioned by name mean to make people feel uncomfortable. I'm just saying. But no, this is an awesome polo, the OGDC polo. I really thought this was cool. It's a nice piece. Has the stripes, has a couple stars on it. Really gives you a feel like you're a true American when you own a piece of gear like this, and that you're representing our country in some way. So I picked this up, the Shop MLR. I believe these are sold out though. So
great sales pitch there, Rob.
Yeah, you have to get your
really awesome, but you can't have it.
What that means is you got to get your gear while you can, right?
Absolutely.
That's true.
And so they do have some other gear from OGDC. So get that stuff while you can. They've still got jerseys. I believe they have some hoodies and some. They don't have them in an extra large, because I was going to go with the hoodie, but they have some hoodies, and I think large and the smaller sizes, and then the big boy sizes like Scott Ferrara can wear. So.
Well, you can never, ever have too much rugby merch, right? That's our philosophy.
Yeah,
true.
So let's dive into what's important here. And we want to remind our viewers here on the Rugby Rant, as we said before, we are the rugby debate show where we put ourselves and our guests to the test. On this format, on this occasion, it's going to be slightly different, because we decided collectively to be able to pick this topic this week instead of going to our usual source of our fans online and asking them. Instead, we decided, as we're now moving towards into the second half of the season here, we got a good reflection of the talent that's out there on the field. And of course, it has been raised to new levels this year. So we're going to be able to sit here and decide who is our top 15, our MLR All-Stars so far. Now, how it will work is each of them are going to be given their opportunity to be able to put forward 5 players as their best picks, identifying first up. His 5 choices will be Scott Ferrara, who will be doing his positions 1 to 5. Following that will be Rob Hammerschmidt with his positions 6 to 10. And then finally, rounding us off in this particular segment will be Brianna Kim, who will be sharing her best 11 to 15. It will go to open format after that to be able to discuss these players that they have recommended as the best of MLR so far. And I cannot stress it is so far, because there is obviously a lot of rugby to come, but a few of them have shined brighter than some of the others so far. And that's why we're here to be able to highlight those guys. And each of them will be given their opportunity to speak. And we're going to hand the mic, first off, to Mr. Scott Ferrara, the big guy himself. Tell us who you think is your 1 to 5.
Let's get hot, baby. So I'm going to start with my one, JB McIntosh on the AGs. He's been a powerhouse all season. Their engine room down in Austin is really good. And he's anchoring it over at 1. Obviously, I got to take my man Butch, Dylan Fawcett, the butcher at Rooney, top hooker right now, playing lights out. Just had 2 tries against the Free Jacks this past Sunday. And then actually to round out my front row, I'm picking an OG. I'm picking Stevie Longwell. I think he's been one of the best tight heads coming in on the scrum side. I think if he can get the ball in hand a little more, it will just solidify that he had the best beginning of the season. My two locks, I'm picking Nate Brakeley from Rooney again. Stalwart guy whose work rate's insane, and Johan Momsen from Atlanta, another guy who's been killing it, kind of like Nate Brakeley. They're doing all the little things right, plus they're doing their own jobs. And then just really some honorable mentions. Sama Malolo, Utah, at hooker. He's doing really well. If Butch wasn't scoring a lot and kind of as important as he was to Rooney, I definitely would have picked Malolo. The tight head thing, I got into a lot of arguments with my friends, when we were going about it, the tight head thing. So I'm going to say Dino Waldron is my honorable mention, although my friends were telling me I was wrong to go with Steve, and I should have went with Dino. I think Dino's better ball in hand, but honestly, I felt Steve was better scrummaging this year, or so far this year. And Patty Ryan, the last 5 matches, has come on to help McIntosh, and as you could see, Austin's has been playing better. Offensively, they haven't been scoring as much, but their scrums have been winning more percentage of the scrums the past 5 games. So Patty Ryan's coming on. And my last honorable mention, I'm going with a lock, Jackson Thebes. He's just been lights out for the Free Jacks and a big bright spot for them up front. And pretty much, I think that's about. And you know what? I'll give another one real quick. James Rochford, Rocky, for Rooney. Honorable mention. Again, it's about him scrummaging and less about the ball in hand for him. You know me, I love the scrums. I got to give it to my scrum guys.
Right. So obviously, you being one of the front rowers yourself, it was an easy subject matter for you to be able to pick your 1 to 5. But I wanted to kind of also give everybody a better understanding of how we're kind of grading our ranters here today. So I had written down a bunch of names that I'm hoping to be able to match when they tell me. So Scott's tactic was say everybody that's ever played rugby.
There you go.
I gave my top
points.
Listen,
just remember
I gave my top 5 up front, and then I just told you who my honorable mentions are. So I don't expect you to grade the honorable mentions.
This is like,
Jamie McIntosh, Dylan Fawcett, Steve Longwell, Nate Brakeley, Johan Momsen.
Ty, this is just like one of those school tests where they're like, list 2 answers, and then he just writes 5 because he's like, 2 of them got to be right?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. So I mean, well,
listen, if I didn't second guess my picks, would I be a proper debater and ranter? Let's be honest. If I had 5 solid picks, right, in this, especially going with the Eastern Conference, where teams are up and down every other week, like how can you have a locked in 5?
Well, I mean, that's the difficult thing, right? And so I did put 2 or 3 names in anticipation that you guys would say something different, and I had a point to agree with you, but I didn't expect you to give 3 names for every position.
Look, Ty, I think he should at least get bonus points here because I'm pretty sure he still got all of those names in under 2.5 minutes or so. So there's gotta be
Brianna, I don't think you know how to
make it any easier on him.
I was just giving him some crap earlier, so I feel like you gotta be equal here.
Okay.
Rob's just trying to catch up. I'm so far ahead of Rob. He's doing everything in his power to beat me.
Okay. All right. So let's reel it back for a moment. Okay, because you did get some really interesting stuff in there. Obviously, like you said, it is hard to be able to pick your best 5. You got a lot of great names in there. I've got some notes that I'll show coming at the end because you did hit a couple of the ones that I definitely do agree with, and I'm pretty sure people at home would agree with those names. But yes, there are a lot of other ones that could be just as qualified or just as worthy as well. But let's find out from Rob what he thinks about positions through 6 to 10. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, I debated whether this should be 6 through 10 that don't play for the Giltinis, or if I should put them, because I mean, quite frankly, they're playing really well, and inevitably, I just went with the best guys at their position in the whole league, right? So at number 6, I'm going with Angus Cottrell from the Los Angeles Giltinis. Hard to argue with 7 tries. He's tied for second in the MLR as a weak side flank. It's pretty impressive. 542 minutes played in 9 games. That comes out to 60 minutes per game, and he's played in every game through 9 weeks of the season. 396 meters carried, 5 turnover poaches. And for me, he's a linchpin between the forwards and the backs, somebody that really is available for an offload and somebody that's always there to receive an offload. So that's why I went him at number 6. Number 7 was Lucas Rumball. And I know, I might make the big guy quiver a little bit here because Lucas.
Is that a pun because it's arrows? Quiver pun?
It is. But he might make him a little bit salty because, he claims that Lucas poaches balls on his elbows and stuff like that. But quite frankly, it's hard to argue with somebody that's around the ruck all the time and puts himself in a position to steal the ball at the ruck. It's what a good number 7 should do. And quite frankly, is one of the best in the business in the MLR. He's made team of the week for 3 weeks, week 1, week 5, and week 6. That's pretty impressive. Out of the 9 weeks we've had so far, he's been in the team of the week 1/3 of the time. So I'd go with him on open side. At 8, you know what I'm going to say. My guy Cam Dolan from the NOLA Gold. And look, objectively, he has scored 4 tries this year. 136 lineouts won. They're tops in the league, NOLA is. And that is attributed to Cam Dolan because he's the quarterback at the lineout. He controls the lineout. He gets a lot of lineout wins for the team. And that serves as a basis for a lot of for their set piece and then from plays from there. And, I distinctly remember, I think it was against Rooney where he had, maybe it was against, I can't remember. Maybe it was against Toronto. He had an incredible poach right at a critical point in the game that ultimately allowed them to secure the game. Yeah. Right at the end. So to me, he's my guy. I love Cam Dolan. So him at number 8. Here's where I struggled.
A lot of good choices at 9, just like anything else, right?
Yeah, there are a lot of good choices, but ultimately for me, I went with a pairing. And I'm going to give an honorable mention that also came as a pairing too. So I'm going to go with Harrison Goddard and Matt Getto at 9-10 combination. Obviously, that's an important combo to have 2 guys that really work well together. But, their stats prove it out. Goddard has 7 tries, tops in the league, tied for second in the MLR. He's a catalyst for their attack, predominantly because of such the speed at the ruck and the quickness to which he gets that ball out. But also, he reminds me a lot of TJ Perenara in that his nose is always around loose play too. He's always there for an offload, always there to get the ball in hand and make a break through a gap. So I really like his play as a number 9. And of course, what can you say about a guy who's been capped 120 times for the Wallabies? Matt Getto, 24 conversions, number 1 in the MLR, 62 total points, number 7 in the MLR. He engineers a high-powered offense. His flat passes are perfectly timed to hit the, for guys carrying the ball to hit the gain line and break the gain line, which is an important piece for them for go forward ball.
Right.
And that's intricate.
And the only game that the Giltinis had lost this season, he wasn't playing, right? I'm not saying he's a one-man machine, right? But it's that binding force, that a special source that they have when he's on the field.
Right. And Houston had them on the ropes for a good portion of the game. And why was that? Well, because no disrespect to Cardi. Cardi's a hell of a player. He's a great boot, but he's not Matt Getto. He's not the engine behind that high-powered, high-octane offense. Now, for my honorable mention, 9-10, I love me some Danny Susatala and some Robertson. They are a phenomenal combination. I think they've done some great things together. Tusitala has 7 try assists this season, number 1 in the MLR. And of course, Robertson is got a great boot, 13 penalties. I think that's number 1 in the MLR. So how could you go wrong with either one of those 9-10 combos?
First of all, thank you for doing your homework. I love stats, in case those of you who don't know watching at home. The MLR app is really a great source to be able to get some awesome information. The stats that we have available now is better than any season before. And clearly Rob has used this to his advantage to gain some cool points and make some great arguments as to why those players were chosen over others. But as you so rightly pointed out, some positions, it's about the combination of players rather than the effort of one player themselves. So I'd like that additional element you added to it there. So I made a note. I gave you a +1. So
for no reason. +1 for no reason.
No reason. What do you mean? It's a perfectly good reason, by the way.
Right. I think that's what it was, though, is you kind of framed it well, and then you offered a reason that made sense to me, because some combinations are better together than if you had to remove one part of that combination. They might not be as effective because it's about that unity. It's about that partnership, right?
I mean, but are we picking the best combination of players? Because at that point, then I'll change my whole front row. You know, are you picking the best player at that position? Are you playing? My point is, are you
Scott,
picking?
That's why I brought stats to the table, because
are you supposed to be picking
support?
Okay,
there you go.
All right, you want to talk Matt Gateau at 62 points or Dan Hans at 87 points?
Maybe if you brought some stats to the table, we'd feel a little bit better about your combinations too.
First of all, you barely understand the dark arts, so let's start with there. And let's point out Dan Hans had 87 points versus Matt Gateau's 62 points. So you want to talk about stats there. I'm not saying Hans head was the best. What I'm saying is you're going on
to try under the post, and therefore he doesn't get the benefit of kicking the extras.
Why are you going on the best pairing? You got to pick the best person. Who is the best guy, not the best pairing, because they work the best.
Let me put it to rest. So Rob had mentioned two names, Goddard and Gitto, right? Now, I had mentioned a few names for each position based on the fact that there are going to be differing choices, right? And then if you hit one of them, it was going to be that. He just happened to hit it for 9 and 10 that I had written down. And then the additional layer on top of that was the combination of them. Now, maybe that's an obvious one because it's the Giltinis, and we could look at even more examples of that. But more to the point, your rant is over and it's Brianna's turn.
All right, guys, I'll kick it off at number 11. I think this one is just pretty much an obvious choice. DTH Van der Merwe. I mean, he's leads the league, 8 tries on the season. He's just a phenomenal player to watch. I mean, obviously we can talk about how entertaining the Giltini attack is, but you can always count on Van der Merwe to always get on the board within the first 30 seconds to the first few minutes. I mean, clearly he's excelled at every stage of the game, and that's no different here at MLR. Now, number 12, I'm going to go with JP Duplessis from NOLA Gold. You know, I want to give a little shout out to Ben Lesage from Toronto, because I think he's also had an excellent season. But look, JP Duplessis has really lived up to the hype that was coming in the offseason, right? The biggest trade in the offseason coming from San Diego, and for good reason. I mean, he leads the team. I think, first of all, you always are going to look at attack because it seems to be more exciting, right? One of the best when it comes to tackle breaks. He's good with the boot. But most importantly, you got to look at the defense side as well. And I think that's why NOLA has been so successful this season, is because defensively they've been so staunch. And when you look at his tackle rate at 91%, I mean, with several dominant tackles and turnovers to add, I mean, there's no question for me. I mean, I think NOLA's defense is led by him. And I think offensively, you know, he's just as staunch as well. So that's for my choice for number 12. Number 13, I'm going to go Dougie Fife from the Free Jacks. He's got 51 total points on the season. He's scored 6 tries. He's had an absurd number of ball carry meters. I think it's something like 781 meters. Not to mention, you talk about the breaks. You talk about 12 line breaks, 13 tackle breaks. And he's fantastic with the boot. You know, I unfortunately distinctly remember when they were playing Old Glory down here at Segra, and twice he had just that perfect, he was involved in just the perfect little, you know, stab the ball through and score the try. I mean, look, he's agile. He's a playmaker. A lot of that comes from his experience playing Scotland 7s and 15s. But he, again, if you look at the Free Jacks and the wins that they have had, he is an important cog in that. So, for 14, this is, I think, where I've had the most difficulty here, and I'm sure we'll talk about later. You know, I was debating between Ross Neal of Seattle and Bren's Robert Sinana of Old Glory, so I'll talk a little bit about both here. I mean, when you look at, you know, Seattle and what they have had success with, it's been giving the ball to Ross Neal and getting points on the board. That's you know, clear as day, right? And but then you look at Renata Robert Sinana, and you know, the stats, if you look at them head to head, you might think that Ross Neal has, you know, the better numbers on the board. But look, at the end of the day, it doesn't quite all come down to stats. And that hurts me to say, Ty, don't worry, because I love stats as well. But, you know, there's more to it than just the numbers, right? And not to mention that Ross Neal has only played wing for about half the season. Not to mention that Seattle hasn't really been able to get any outcomes. And when you look at Old Glory DC, you look at the wins that they've had, and even though Renz maybe doesn't have all of those numbers, he still has been so important for them. I mean, just the other week, he started an amazing try that came out of, him fielding the ball in their own 22, spotting space right behind the line with the perfect chip kick, and that Doug Frazier finished, right? He's not going to get any credit for that. But the way that he works off of the ball and the way that OG has been performing, he is so important to their attack. And so 414, I'm going to pick Roberts Tanana. And finally, to round us out here at 15, I think this is a little bit more obvious for me here, but Mike, you got to go with Mikey Teo from the Utah Warriors. 6 try assists. He's third in the league for ball carries at 102. He's second in the league for meters made on those ball carries. And I mean, he's just been absolutely electric, not to mention he's third in the league for tackle breaks. I mean, I was just talking about Renz. You talk about someone who's really propelling his team forward and getting those points on the board necessary for his team to win. Utah's been winning because of Mikey Teo. There's no way around that.
Yeah. I mean, those are all, first of all, excellent points. But gentlemen, how is that delivery?
Thank you.
First rate. First rate.
Like I said, we're the amateurs and we got the pro here, and I think we just got schooled.
Well, we still got 20 minutes to debate, so we'll see.
Right. Well, no, here's a couple of things that I did want to mention. Obviously, I love the fact that you got a great balance, and you pointed it out because it is important. As much as I do love the stats, it doesn't tell the full story. As you pointed out, maybe it's a new position, maybe it's only part, the season that they played that role, but it's really about that something else that's about their makeup and their recipe, work rate on the field, their playmaking ability, the rugby IQ that they have that might be far superior in one position than in another position, or do they just have that IQ no matter what position they play because they're that versatile a player? Those players are perhaps the most valuable to a coach, right? Because you can see them in multiple positions, and rugby has developed to this. If you rewind 20, 25 years, you were designed for one role, and you did that role, and that was your mission, and that was your task at hand. Rugby's become such a more versatile player positions, and it's developed in its professionalism that players have to be skilled in many different skill sets, right? And perhaps these 15 that we've outlined personify that best. That DTH could probably just be as successful on the left as he is on the right, because he's that player that's searching for the ball. He comes off his wing, he finds the opportunity, he runs the right line because he's got that rugby IQ, he's got that intellect that has grown with him having played overseas. So those names that you mentioned there are all fantastic names. Just a few honorable mentions I might add to your list, Brianna. Ferre from Sabercats, fantastic, right? Also another great finisher, great playmaker. To Rob's delight, I'll say Carl Mayer, right? And great positional play, great experience in the field. These are elements that they're just they're entrenched in the teams, and they're anchors in the team as a result.
And might I add, his boot to get them out of bad positions deep in the territory has been incredibly important. I think we've seen the weakness when he's not in the lineup the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about a boot? I think we missed Joaquin Toussaint at the 15. I think the two things he gives Toronto is, one, those booming exit kicks, which I witnessed firsthand when they played Rudy. And then secondly, his counterattack to find the space is he's like a man among boys when he gets the ball and he has his vision to open up that counterattack offense. And I think that what happens is, because he has the boot, it kind of stalls the defense a little bit on their rush up to the gain line, and that opens up big holes that he finds to get. And don't get me wrong, he's not really scoring the points. You don't see it. And even the try assist, sometimes he's that third pass. He's the first pass out of 3, but he's setting everybody else up to have a clean break down the sideline.
Right. And these are all valuable elements of the game. And in fact, when we try to be able to help people recognize, and friends that are watching the show here, hopefully walk away not only having learned about some of the studded cast that we have here in MLR through what we consider to be the best of the MLR so far, but they also learn some of the key responsibility of these players. So Brianna, I'll deliver this question to you. If you had to pick 3 key positions that somebody new to the game should be watching for, and players that represent that to you right now, what would those positions be and some of those players?
Well, I think the obvious one, or the obvious two rather, would be the halfback combos, right? Rob already talked about this, the 9, the scrum half, and the 10, the fly half, because those two, if you were to compare it to an American sport, right, those two are like the quarterbacks for the team, right? So they are driving the attack, they're controlling the pace of play on attack, and then on defense, they're really directing everyone, telling them where to line up, where to mark up, anticipating the next phase of play, probably earlier than the rest of their teammates. Robbie, did you want to add something to that?
Well, it's funny you say that because I just wish Ruben de Haas had gotten all 8 games at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, for me, as you talk about number 9, Ruben de Haas last week put on a display of what, for me, a prototypical number 9 will do. And of course, his wealth of experience at the international level was on display.
Right. And still so young at 22, right?
Yeah,
and he's
it was 24, but
it was perfect 24. Saracens play with the box kick too.
Yeah, he had like 4 box kicks that really got them out of bad situations, and B, a couple of them put the Giltinis on their heels. And I can't say enough about his positional play. I just wish that he would have been able to play a full season with the Gilgronis.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're also missing. Sorry to cut you off, Brianna, but I think you're also missing. Nick Boyer moving to the SaberCats and doing what he did, and not having a chance to play at the Giltinis, getting moved to a team and having immediate impact. Where they put up 30-something points, and then Carlo Denison coming in at the number 9 and not having the support in the back line because you had Dylan Audsley go out with a freak injury. Nate Osberger was out with injury, and you had a young 9 trying his best without the support, and I don't think his play shined as much because San Diego were in those injury woes.
Right. So I wanted to be able to return to the core question there. So we identified 9 and 10 being key decision makers, playmakers, important to the makeup of a rugby team. What would be another position, Brianna, that you might mention?
Well, really quick, I just wanted to add to something, Rob. I thought that was a great point. I'm sorry, actually, Scott, I think it was you who brought up the move of Nick Boyer. I mean, that's just a perfect example. But also, looking at Old Glory, I mean, as you guys mentioned, Danny Tustala and Jason Robertson are, what is really driving this team forward. But at the same time, these two guys, they were outstanding last year. And I think this year they've been great, but I don't think that they've quite been at the top of their game at times. And I think when that happens, you start to see Old Glory tend to struggle a little bit, right? Especially if Jace is facing injury or battling an injury, you see that affect the team. So I think that's why those two are so important. This third one for me, I think it could be a couple of different positions here. I mean, I think that the hooker is really important, but I want to argue somewhere in the back row, probably at the 8-man, just because obviously it's got to be somewhere in the forwards to help drive that scrum, but especially, the breakdown to me is so important, especially defensively, right? And if you don't have guys, like Angus Cottrell, Lucas Rumball, or Cam Dolan, another name I'd want to throw out there is, Jamma Fontanana Schultz, who I think is having a great career or great season thus far. I mean, if you don't have guys that can disrupt at the breakdown, slow down that ball, your team's never going to turn over that ball. So I think for me, I'd argue 8, but interested to see what you guys think.
I think that's a fair assessment. Any of those poachers, and the importance I want to drive home for those that are not quite familiar. The breakdown is one of those areas you need to dominate, to be physical at. You need to disrupt the quick ball, and the Giltinis have been so successful because they managed to recycle those balls so quickly, right? And we've spoken about that. The key to stopping, teams that like that is just getting bodies in the way, getting hands on the ball, being a menace. And 8, 7, and 6, those are all key players in the back row that this is their role. One of the other names that I was excited to be able to watch earlier this season was Callum Gibbons, right? We had the privilege of interviewing him just as he came to OGDC. And, another great example of somebody who's a veteran of the sport at some of the highest levels. These guys are a part of that important makeup in the scrum, as you said, that is driving everything forward, but also just those turnovers. So important, they need to be first at the breakdown. And he's a great example. Cottrell, you mentioned some really great names. What are your thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I wanted to add some of my honorable mentions. I know Callum Gibbons was one of them. And I think it's more the intangibles that he brings to Old Glory. Right. And I think it's his leadership, his physical toughness.
Of course, because he fills a player coach role because that some people might not be aware of.
Exactly. And then the other guy that I really like, and I think it's a guy who could show up on the Eagles short list, right? Very soon, Jason Dam from Rugby ATL.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
Definitely.
I mean, he is an absolute physical menace with the ball in hand.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with his play when they played NOLA, and I've been impressed with him when they played Rooney as well. I really like his style of play. I think, when Cam hangs him up, I think he's a guy that could take over in his shoes and really perform really well.
Right.
Yeah, no, so, it was that he's if I had to choose your 8, I would have had trouble with him and Dolan, to be honest.
Yeah. So remind me, did anybody mention O'Keefe for Rugby A2L? I mean, that would probably be my pick at 13 then, who's been phenomenal.
He's really come on in the last 4 games. He's looked
right. And it's kind of, and that's, I mean, peaking at the right time, right? It's better to be able to do it later in the season than just at the start. Another one, Carlser for Rugby ATL. Another great addition, kind of coming into his own later in the season. So, players can make a great impact, even though they might not have been there the entire season. They might arrive at the exact time that team needs them, or, all the pieces of the puzzle suddenly fall into place because you got the right combination, and that was the missing piece, right? So this, as you said, I don't know who said it, but there's so many intangibles to be able to measure. And so really, this is really all subjective, but we have put forward what we consider to be our best all-star MLR so far, right? And we encourage you as the viewers at home to be able to tell us if you think we're on point, way off, and here's what you think. Make sure that you drop a comment on our social media, whenever we post this, let us know, and we'll be happy to be able to meet you in argument on a further episode. But that's what it's all about, is to spark debate. The more we speak about rugby, the more we show that we enjoy it. It's a sport that's fueled by passion. What we and everybody on screen here, I believe I speak for them as well, is believe that this is one of the most beautiful games, if not the best game around, because it instills so many great values in those that enjoy it and those that participate it and those that support it, right? All of these players are great ambassadors for the sport, and where the MLR is right now is so incredible to be able to see how far it has come in such a short time. And I'm sure everybody here would echo that same sentiment. But let me ask you, what are some of your thoughts overall for the performances this season?
I think certain players have had better performances based upon how the teams have set them up to play versus maybe actively doing something. And you guys were talking about the loose forwards before, but you got to look at, if you don't have the loose forwards to cover those breakdowns, a lot of teams are using locks. Josh Furno coming back for San Diego. I know he missed the first couple of games, so he was a little off. I'm gonna assume Josh Furno in the second half of the season turns it on, especially in the lineouts. And that's something that it's unfortunately with a lock, you're born with height. You're naturally born with the height. You can't teach height, as a lot of people say. So I think it gets lost for the new fans on that portion. But I think the players has been great. I think you're seeing ebbs and flows, and certain players play week to week, and they just need to gain that consistency that other professional leagues have. And I think we're almost there.
And I'd like to add, I think injuries have really impacted teams' ebbs and flows too, right?
Yeah.
You see teams having to take players and move them out of a typical position to as injury cover. We've seen that in Houston, where they've been shifting Sam Windsor around from 10 to the midfield and then back to fullback.
He might play prop soon.
Yeah. And so, I think part of their woes have been partly contributed to the fact that they haven't really been able to find the consistency in their lineup due to quite a few injuries. We saw that with San Diego for sure. They had a lot of injuries in those games right at about the quarter mark season, and now they've got some guys back. They're really starting to show some improvement. So that's one of the things I've noticed is perhaps depth is the things that some teams struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you look at the first 9 games that have happened, I mean, you could argue that the first 4 or 5 games, I mean, there was some really fun rugby to watch, but it was the preseason for them, right? We didn't have a preseason because of the pandemic. And unfortunately, that means that these teams have faced so many injuries. I know that San Diego, like you said, Rob, just now, and Seattle, they've been decimated with so many injuries. And that's just what's going to happen when you don't have a preseason. And so, in this next half of the season, it's going to look a lot different. And I think you'll start, we've already seen the identities of each team kind of come out, but like you said, the depth is so important, and that it's going to be very different to see how these players perform, because, some of like the starting 15 that you might see starts for the same team every single week in and week out. Like, guarantee you that's not going to be the same 15 that's going to, appear at the end of the season.
And will some of that continuity be broken up because of international service?
Oh yeah,
in the second half. And that's the thing that will be disappointed to see it. Like, and Scott talks about Rooney, how many of their players we may see not in the lineup as a result of international play.
Right. We had the opportunity to be able to discuss that very same thought a while back. However, if you're trying to find the silver lining, it means that there's plenty of opportunity for other players to step up and show what they're made of, right? And that's where we can identify how much depth there is in these teams. So let's put a pin in it now. And I think we've said what we needed to say. We've shared our thoughts. We've given our top 15 of this MLR best so far. And now I needed to be able to remind everybody that we need to pick a winner.
But before you do, Ty, hold on. We got one more thing we got to do.
What's that?
We got to talk about the passion part of rugby that you mentioned before.
Right.
And we know that Rugby Coffee, one of our sponsors, was born out of two passions: providing ethically sourced coffee and promoting the growth and development of rugby. By combining these two passions, the folks at Rugby Coffee see an opportunity to bring people together. And together we began to make a difference. Rugby Coffee invests 10% of their profits in giving kids opportunities to play rugby and projects that help uplift communities. These endeavors have been transformational in many kids' lives and uplifted and empowered these communities. The boys at Rugby Coffee are taking pre-orders for 3 distinct brews: Jouet, Champions Cup, and Crowd Favorite. Each brew has its own unique style and flavor. Get your brew and support youth rugby. A simple vision can be transformational. Rugby as a sport can inspire communities and bring hope and provide opportunity. Rugby Coffee, it's not just a game, it's a way of life.
What better reason to enjoy a cup of coffee when you know that a piece of it goes to growing rugby somewhere in the US and Canada? Such a special message, and from special partners help make our show possible for us to be able to continue doing what we love, which is sharing the game of rugby. Because as you know, here on the Rugby Rant, we aim to help grow rugby one fan at a time. And you can, of course, take the opportunity to learn a little bit more about us by following us online under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course on TikTok, once again under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod. You can also find us weekly on TRN every Friday with a new debate, as this one here has been an interesting one, but we do need to crown a champion. So once again, we did it a little bit differently, and each person told us their best 5 from the positions 1 to 5, 6 to 10, and 11 to 15. I also then, away from the show, wrote down a whole bunch of names, and now I put the tally together, and the one who I believed more closely resembled my picks, because it's all about me, of course, on the Rugby Rant, the points mean nothing. It's all about the bragging rights, and the bragging rights go to Mr. Rob Hatterschmidt one more time.
Bam!
Typical official, knows nothing about the dark arts. Typical.
Put that in the Hudson River and stir it around a little bit, Scott.
Typical official. We'll start calling Ty Mike Lash Braga. That's what we'll start.
Out of curiosity, what's the record here? Well, who has the most wins so far?
I do. Kicking my ass. It's true.
Yeah. Yes. So Scott is overall champ, but Rob is now reaching almost on a streak. He's got 2 in a row.
Almost on a streak.
Yeah. So it's an eternal battle between them, and we always hope to be able to have somebody like yourself kind of mix it up And I will add this just because I know it will hurt Scott even more, that I would have put you in second there, Brianna.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ty. Appreciate it.
Again, that just shows you Ty has no idea what the first 5 guys do ever on the field.
No, that's not true. I have played hooker in sevens.
Yeah, okay. Uh-huh. And I was 100 pounds when I was 6. I'm just saying.
Still counts, doesn't it? You know what? Once again, it has been a blast. Brianna, we'd like to be able to give the floor to our guests before we head out of each episode. We know that you're, of course, a great advocate for rugby and everything inside it and everything that it encompasses. But here's the floor to be able to send a shout out to anybody important, a special message you want to send. Here's your opportunity.
Oh man, you didn't warn me about this, Ty. I couldn't prepare for this.
Yeah, this is the hospital pass. You didn't know it was coming.
Here we go.
You got to run with it. No problem.
No, look, the season has been great so far, and I think anyone that's watching the show right now, clearly you're a fan of rugby. You're a fan of what rugby is like in America. So keep soaking it all up. I think there's lots of great people in and around this environment who are happy to share, the gospel that is rugby. So, keep sharing this kind of, content with your friends, with your family. Most importantly, I think above all, as restrictions start to lift, go to games, right? Show your support live, because there are a lot of people who wish they could be at these games every single week that can't be, right? But that's the only way that we grow this league, right? The guys right here, but that's the only way that we grow this league is to, get butts and seats, get the revenue going, because we have something special here, and it's only going to get better from here.
Right. I've said it 100 times before, but I'll say it one more time because it does ring true. It's certainly building on what you said. To be a supporter of rugby is very simple. Buy a ticket, bring a friend or family, buy some merch while you're there, get a beer from a team sponsor, all these things. We're not asking you to be able to start a rugby team. We're just asking you to be able to support it in the way that is convenient to you. And collectively, it all makes the difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, once again, it has been a stellar opportunity to be able to share rugby with you here on the Rugby Rant podcast show. And before we head out, a final reminder that you can, of course, find our content on social media at the handle at Rugby Rant Pod. You can find new episodes of new debates each week on our social media, in addition to its new home on the Rugby Network, where you can see us every Friday with a new rugby debate. This occasion, we had myself, Ty Braga, Scott Ferrara, Rob Hammerschmidt, and Brianna Kim. On behalf of all of us, we say thank you for watching the Rugby Rant, and we'll see you at the next. And welcome back, rugby fans. Again, this is the Rugby Debate Show. We put ourselves and the guests to the test. However, now we need to be able to talk about our weekly game analysis. Now, this was an interesting one, gentlemen, because we got for the first time to be able to see the cocktail cup that's been colloquially referred to as. Others might refer to it as the Gill Cup. But of course, who are we talking about? We're talking about the LA Giltinis versus the Austin Gilgronis, more commonly referred to as the AGs. So this is really a battle that was inevitable when you look at the offense on one side and the defense on another side, that perhaps it was inevitable it was going to be a lower scoring game, but still was not short of excitement, was not short of some great rugby play. And that's what we're going to do over here, is kind of dig a little bit deeper into it as we hear from Scott and Rob. But first up, let's hear what Scott has to say.
All right, we're still cooking, baby. So I think it's funny, the AG's match, kind of, as far as the weather, people might not notice it from watching it, but being there, the weather was similar from the match before. So the first half was a dry half, and then as that sun went down, the humidity skyrocketed and the ball became wet. And you kind of saw in the second half, the offense died down. You saw more handling errors on both sides of the ball.
Fatigue set in with that humidity.
Again, exactly. So if you had fatigue, you had the ball being physically, not, slick and wet, and then, perspiring players. So it kind of, it was a conglomerate to create a second half that wasn't the most exciting, especially when you have the number one offense in LA there. I think they only kicked a penalty in the second half. And to be honest, I think the AGs, continue to struggle offensively. I don't know what they can do to change that. They're awesome on their set pieces. They're really good at the scrum. They're great at the line out. They can run a rolling maul, halfway down, but for whatever reason, they get inside the 5 meter line and they can't get it done. What I didn't like, and what this was debated through the fans, my friends that were watching, Rob, Ty, Craig Gridelli, Mike Perezzini, those guys. I said at the end of that first half, why are you kicking for 3 points when you're facing a juggernaut of an offense who already has, I think it was 12 points at that point on them, or whatever it was. And because you got all the way down to the 5 meter line, and then you got a penalty within the 5 meter line. Why were you kicking for points when you had got there?
For me, it's confidence.
Well, that's the thing is they were like, but would you rather go away with no points? At that point, I gamble because I know my offense hasn't been doing well. So why shouldn't you gamble and put the 5 points on the board, hopefully get the 7 for the conversion, and go in the sheds with 7 points instead of 3 points when you're already down and you're going against a juggernaut of an offense? I think it just came down to the AGs were more conservative when they shouldn't have been in that second half, that last part of the first half, that second half of the first half, we'll call it. And then it kind of, between the weather and the through line of their conservative play, they just kind of let it, melt away.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a reminder for those of you who are watching or listening and not entirely familiar with this game, let me offer you a couple of reminders that LA Giltinis and Austin are both actually owned by the same organization, which is hence their Gil connection. But more to the point, their similarities kind of end there. Right. They're two totally different teams. I don't want anybody to put them in the same bucket because they think they're under the same umbrella. Right. It's not. One is clearly offensive. And we realize that with the points scored and sitting on top of the logs with the LA Giltinis. It's just, it's about speed. It's about pace. It's about the inventive nature of those players and experience. Right. Experience. Now, it's not to say that on the opposite side, Austin doesn't have the experience. It's they've are the greatest defensive side. And yes, I like what Scott had brought up is what is missing there. I mean, yes, you have the greatest defense, and we all know that a lot of people may subscribe to the theory that the best defense wins the games, right? But is that the style of rugby that is best supported by MLR? I don't have the answer to that, right? But their set plays are good. Their lineouts are solid. Their scrummaging is great. They've got all these right parts, but there's no magic in between, right? They're running crash ball lines too often. There's no inventiveness. Whereas I see on the opposite side from the Giltinis, you see an inside line, you see a pop on a cross, you see the scissor plays, you see the wraparounds, you see the screen passes.
And the thing that the Giltinis were doing on offense in this particular match was they were going through the A gap and going across the breakdown immediately. You can't hurdle a tackler, but if somebody's in the breakdown, as soon as you pick up the ball, there's no breakdown, so you can jump over the ruck.
Right.
And if there's nobody there to tackle you, you're not hurdling a tackler. And they had several runs directly over the former breakdown. And what I saw on the Austin side, Austin should have done the same thing because LA wasn't contesting anything at the breakdown. LA knew that if they could set up their defensive line early, they didn't worry about the jackal. They worried about the tackle and the support to not have any holes in to have any gaps, on their defensive line. AGs did not capitalize on bringing the ball and crashing it in on top of the breakdown, which the Giltinis did.
Which could have exposed the gaps. Yeah, absolutely. So let's just talk about the scoreline for a moment before I hand it over to Rob. So this was a matchup that, like we said before, was kind of deemed the Cocktail Cup, but more importantly, it was at home for the Austin Gilgronis, the AGs, at Bold Stadium. The final scoreline was 17-3 in favor of the LA Giltinis. With that in mind, let's hand it over to Rob to hear his thoughts about the matchup.
So what I was most impressed with on behalf of LA, and by the way, let me take a step back. I think, it's a few weeks back we talked about on the Rugby Rant, what style defines Major League Rugby at this point. And it's kind of funny that we talked about that because this game, I would think, was emblematic of the differences in our opinions about what style defines the MLR, because I think some of us, said that it was a more open style play. I think we talked about this with Kyle Ferguson from the Rugby Shop. And yet Scott said, well, hold your horses. There's a couple of teams that really represent more of that Northern Hemisphere style of play. And I think we saw these two contrasting styles this week on the same pitch. And so let me go to first. I was really impressed with the LA back row. If there's probably one of the best back rows combinations in MLR, you got Angus Cottrell, you got Poitevin, and then you've got Adam Ash, right? And they just work really well together. And one of the places where I saw it most effective was in the shot tackle. You see a lot of their forwards are tackling in pairs. So one guy would go low, one guy's high, and immediately that guy's high is in selective places, not all the time, but in selective places, they were then going in for the poach, and they got a number of steals in that way. So I think that was critical to their success. We saw Cottrell offensively pick up, as Scott was talking about, attacking that A gap, the pick and go through that A gap, and then he sprung free only to offload to Rydberg, and that was at 36 minutes right there before, at 47 minutes right there after the half started. So kudos to LA's back row. One of the other things that I noticed is two key players for Austin. One of them got injured at, I think, the 18-minute mark, Michael Duvall. And you saw the score line was really close until that time, right? I think it was 0-0 until the 16th or 17th minute. And I think right around that time is when Duvall came out of the game. And Michael Duvall, LU product, I think is really, really good at the back row. He's really, really good at the breakdown. When they lost him, I think it hurt their ability to resist that Giltini attack, because he really orchestrates that rush defense that they have.
Right.
I think the other guy that really kept them in the game, so kudos to him, is Ruben DeHaas. I counted his ability to relieve pressure and to put pressure on LA with a box kick. I think he had 5 or 6 really strong box kicks that achieved one of those two.
And this is a tool that's not being used very well across the, well, in my opinion, not as well as it could be, right?
Well, because, a lot of the nines lack the skill to be able to do it, right?
Well, but because they haven't been taught to do it. And Ruben, Ruben, for those who don't know, Saracens product, that this is something the Saracens do. That's their game plan. They're known for doing it. Their English kickers, this is what they do, the box kick.
Which almost well into the credence that we're saying that Austin more closely resembles a Northern Hemisphere style of rugby.
And before Rob goes on real quick, Rob, I do agree with you that Ruben executed those kicks well, but I don't think the rest of the team followed up with what they should have done after he kicked it.
You mean the chase, right?
Well, the supporting lines as well, and all of that. There's I mean, that's one half of it, right? I mean, you can execute the kick perfectly every time, but there's, what is the saying? A kick is only as good as its chase.
Right.
Yeah. So yes, I do believe that. Circling back around to the point that you were saying that Giltini's kind of started to open up the scoreline in the latter part of the game. Once I think you mentioned Duvall had left the pitch, right? Yes, key playmaker, important in the defensive line, kind of a general in his position. But if you look back at many of the matches that have been in the favor of the Giltinis, which of course is most of them, most of the points, like they got to a point where it was a good battle. Like we always talk about Houston Sabercats, we went toe to toe with them. We talk about teams that did really well in the first half, maybe even down to the 50th or 60th minute, and then it kind of opened up. And I think it's ultimately because the guys that they're at the LA level have been playing much tougher, quote unquote, harder leagues across the globe, and their level of fitness is perhaps a little bit greater than most around the league. So when your legs start to get tired and the fatigue starts to set in, or the humidity has a factor, or whatever it may be, those 50-50 passes, they're making them and the other team isn't.
And that speaks to my last point. Scott hit it the nail on the head with the humidity. The number of mistakes made by LA in coughing up the ball, they're more offensive-minded team, right? So, do you expect them to always be on attack? Well, they were on the attack, and I think I counted 9 times that they knocked the ball on in the green zone. And so, with chalk it up to Austin's really good defense and resisting the pressure, and the fact that, the conditions kind of took their toll on the LA attack.
Right. And you saw that pattern as far as handling errors in the Rooney match. The last 7 minutes of the Rooney match, when I was there, it started to rain, and you had that early rain sprinkle similar to that humidity. And I wonder, in the Houston match, they had the same amount of errors. You're in Texas. It was a night match. I wonder if it was the same pattern of weather And maybe this is something that LA just hasn't thought of. They have to, it's great to be in California with 70 degrees and sunny all the time, but maybe they have to practice in crappy weather because they're not used to it.
Right. Could be a fair point. So
what you're saying, Scott, is when NOLA plays LA in LA, I hope it rains.
Yeah, especially for NOLA, if rain and humidity, man.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, 100%.
So, gentlemen, where we stand right now is we know that this clearly was another great win for LA. The defense is unmistakably one of the great strengths for the Gilgronis. However, offense, I wonder, like, when is it going to click? Is it going to click? But there are much people speculating that this might be a final matchup too. I mean, these teams may have the opportunity to be able to battle each other out for all of it at the end.
No, it's semifinal. Right, because
semifinal. Sorry, you're right.
The semifinal, because the other team's going to come from the
East.
East.
Still yet to be decided, right?
Yeah.
And then I guess if the question I'm trying to be able to draw attention to, what does Austin have to do the next time if they meet LA?
Well, Rob, you got to get. I would say you hope to get Connor Mooneyham back. Right. I mean, he's lightning quick. He's devastating. If you get him in open play, he's really effective. So you want to go to the wide channels and see if you can spring one of your two wings back. Who's the other wing that's really been showing a lot of promise lately in the number 14?
Waters, Roderick.
Is it Roderick Waters? Yeah. I mean, here's another athletic American player who can really spring it loose. And so if you get those guys in the wide channels and support them with some forwards that can, turn the ball back into your side and keep working those wide channels, they might be able to see success.
But they're also not going to have DeHaas, right? He for the timing of it, he wouldn't be available.
He's only on loan, right?
Yeah, for a certain time period. So I think by the time the playoffs come, his loan is gone.
Plus, he might be doing international service.
Yeah. Well, and sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to that point is that there needs to be something. There needs to be a spark in offense. But, returning to it, even if Mooneyham is there and you got Waters on the other side, who are both inspiring players and are both more than capable, is it enough still? I mean, they've had those guys on the field before, and we still saw them with lower scoring numbers. And I'm not saying they haven't been effective in their job, but the games they even have been the victor has still been lower scoring than in comparison to other MLR games.
Yeah, and maybe it's tactical in some games they've won. It's been tactical mistakes on how teams have played. Look at the Rooney match, the amount of conversion penalty kicks they were going after. If they took the penalty and quick tapped or kicked to the corner, they have a rolling maul for a try. All of a sudden, Austin might not be winning that match. So,
right.
Have not to say that they've been lucky to run into that, but maybe they've run into that more often because of their defense.
Right. They've done enough to get the wins, but will it continue to be enough?
Correct.
And as the teams get more developed, as they get more continuity. Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's going to be enough for them to be there at the semifinal. I just don't think it's enough for them to beat LA.
Right.
I mean, something short of Matt Gitu,
right.
Injury.
So you need that star cost. I mean, is that just really the star power we're talking about, or does I love to be able to imagine that a team that can work so well together defensively, obviously their record speaks for itself, but what are the components that are missing, and just identify those. And if it is the injection of another spark plug player or a great playmaker that is yet to be revealed, you have to get the feeling that it must happen in the next 2 or 3 games, right? Like, but as it stands, I mean, their record in defense is great. But when it's up against the best offense in the league, it's just not enough.
And one thing I could add, perhaps somebody if they had a fullback that was really more of an attacking fullback. I mean, fullback. Like, I like Will McGee, but Will, as a great boot, I mean, he put them under pressure. The Giltides under pressure late in the game. Really had a pressure relieving kick, but he's more of a kicking fullback rather than attacking fullback. Perhaps if they had an attacking fullback, Kurt Morath perhaps back there that might inspire a little bit more. In the attack.
And it is a possibility because we know that MLR doesn't really quite have a strict trade window. So players can be brought in. Who knows what their policy may be? Who knows what may come? As it stands now, we again took the opportunity to be able to run through our thoughts on this matchup that ended up 17-3 in favor of the Giltinis against the Austin Gilgronis at home at Bold Stadium. The next time they meet might very well be in a semi-final position, and we'll see what would have changed, if anything at all. But certainly was an interesting matchup to be able to see these differing styles in MLR. And it helped us perhaps settle a debate that we earlier put to you as the fans as to what style best represents the MLR. And we saw two great examples of it in this matchup. So,
Ty, if I could just interject, for fans out there watching this coming weekend, we could very well see ATL and the Giltinis who are playing this weekend. That could be the final matchup on August 1st. So pay attention to this game. I think it could really tell us a lot about what might happen in the future.
Right. Well, may very well happen to be our game of the week then, right? So it's important to be able to make sure that we take the opportunity to once again, before we head out, remind you that what we do is brought to you with the help of our partners at Rugby Coffee. So go check them out, rugbycoffee.com. They do have their pre-order campaign. And of course, that'll be your opportunity to get those first North American roasts and blends that a piece of each sale will go to helping rugby grow and the youth of rugby across the US and Canada. And of course, make sure that you go and get your gear, your merch, and everything else that you need as a fan from shopmlr.com, powered by our friends at the rugbyshop.com. Gentlemen, it has been another phenomenal debate. And we, of course, have taken the time to talk about this. We'll continue to be able to share with you as a fan all of what we have come to learn about MLR as we debated on this format here on the Rugby Rant pod. And you can follow us on social media, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or TikTok under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod. My name is Ty Braga, your host for today's activities, alongside Scott, the Big Guy Ferrara, and Rob, the Hammer Hammerschmidt. We thank you for watching this episode of the Rugby Rant, and we will see you at the next.